History is riddled with great rivalries like Tyson and Holyfield, Mario and Bowser, Harry Potter and Voldemort, Jason and Freddy, Biggie and Tupac, Joker and the Batman, and of course, the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart. Check out this clip.
The Shawn Michaels fans were the fans of the casual wrestling fans that just wanted to see the dive and the flip and the like we've got today, that just want to see somebody go out there and do moves and shit. He was very ballet like, right? And so for the casual fan and somebody who just watched wrestling see that was the Michaels. Bret Hart, those fans were into the art of and the sport of pro wrestling. And Bret was more consistently serious and believable and the things that they wanted, and that led to more guys wanting to be wrestlers.
That clip, of course, courtesy of Jim Cornette's Drive-Thru. You can listen each and every week. Man, when I was growing up, you were absolutely either a Bret guy or a Shawn guy. Very few people liked both because they were always at each other's necks, on screen and behind the scenes. And if you don't think the dirt sheets were around back in those days and people didn't know that the Heartbreak Kid and the Hitman didn't get along in real life, you got another thing coming. Because these guys have been beefing. But it wasn't just their beefs behind the scenes that made their rivalry so interesting. It was their on-screen rivalry. The way that their careers seemed to just parallel each other completely. You know, Bret Hart comes in with Jim the Anvil Neidhart as the Hart Foundation. Shawn Michaels comes in with Marty Jannetty as the Rockers. Both of them have a tag team run in the same era. The late 80s, early 90s. The teams feuded against each other. There was even an infamous match where the Hart Foundation dropped the tag team titles to the Rockers, who on record have never won the tag team titles. But there was a moment in history where the Hart Foundation dropped the straps, did the jizz brother, to the Rockers, but they didn't keep it because the ring ropes broke, and by the time they got around to being able to refilm the fucking thing, Vince got a hair up his ass and decided he didn't want to anymore. Then they both split up and go on a solo run right around the same time. Bret, of course, did not turn on Jim the Anvil Neidhart. He just sort of casually split off and went into the Intercontinental title territory. Shawn Michaels, of course, the greatest betrayal in the history of professional wrestling. The infamous barbershop window. If you don't think, if the barbershop window doesn't still just sit in your subconscious on a daily basis, right? Like, this was the biggest, holy shit, oh my God, I've never seen a heel turn like that in my lifetime of active watching wrestling. There have been some great heel turns in the history. And you could argue that there were bigger, grander, better ones like Hollywood Hogan and that sort of thing. Roman Reigns finally turning bad guy. But when the Heartbreak Kid held Marty Jannetty's hand up, we're together, I'm still with you, brother. And then he sort of directed him, hey, man, you got to go over here. He gives him that little hand. I wish he wouldn't have done that. It's the only flaw in that whole scene. Kind of gives him that little pat on the belly to kind of be like, hey, you back up a little bit so I can kick you. But when he nailed that super kick to Marty Jannetty's face, the world's fucking jaw dropped. Bobby Heenan, I knew it. And then Shawn takes him and he throws him through the barbershop window. Or if you want to take Bobby Heenan's side of the story, Marty Jannetty tried to run like a coward and jumped through the window all on his own. Either way, both of these men were now set on their singles path, wrestling in the Intercontinental Championship division. Michael's now the sexy boy, Bret still just the Hitman. And they start feuding again over the Intercontinental title. They even had a ladder match before ladder matches were a thing, before WrestleMania 10. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels ladder match. It exists for the Intercontinental title. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels at the Survivor Series, right? Most infamous. Did you know that they also wrestled at the Survivor Series for the Intercontinental title years earlier? Yeah, you did. Of course you did. You wouldn't be listening to my show if you didn't know that. And again, just these two parallel characters. And sometimes Shawn's the champ, other times Bret's the champ. But it seemed on these two solo paths that Shawn Michaels was the golden boy, right? Shawn was clearly the chosen one by Vince, but Bret was the guy earning it. Not that Shawn didn't hold his weight, wasn't any good, didn't earn his spot either. He did. He certainly did. But Bret was the guy that Vince kind of had to fall back on almost. Like, he wasn't the guy that Vince wanted. He was the guy that Vince needed. The guy that Vince could depend on. The guy that was there when the guy that Vince wanted didn't work out. Right? That happened first with Lex Luger. So then we switched to Bret. And then we tried Yokozuna. And then we switched to Bret. And then we tried Shawn. Or we tried Diesel. And then we switched back to Bret. Right? All of these. And that's getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves, because as Shawn and Bret would continue to grow and continue to dominate and just outwork everybody, pure work ethic, right? Before it was a thing with Christian, who's out there every single night outworking everybody, of course, right? You see him every single week outworking everybody. That's his gimmick. Shawn and Bret were outworking everybody, and they earned their way up to the world title picture. And this was groundbreaking at the time, because guys their size were never in the world title picture before. Roddy Piper, you could argue, is the smallest guy to ever sniff a world title in that era. Maybe Bob Backlund, he wasn't that big of a guy either, but now you're getting back into the 70s and very early 80s. And it was a big man business. Mach wasn't that big either. You get my point. Quit fucking trying to come up with examples. Okay? It was Andre and Hogan. That was it. Big guys. Anyway. So now you got a Shawn Michaels and a Bret Hart that have worked their way up. And I love both these stories too, because you just don't see it happen like this anymore. And because it happened so prominently with Shawn and it happened so prominently with Bret, we were almost trained and conditioned and shown that path as kids of working your way up the ladder, right? We watched it in real time. When I started watching wrestling, both these guys were in tag teams. And I watched them become singles, become Intercontinental champions, and work their way up to the main event to both become WWF champion. And if you look back, Bret Hart had some of the greatest matches of that era. It was not a well-regarded era as far as like a boom time in the business. But Bret carried that shit on his back. Everybody he worked with had their best match with Bret. Kevin Nash, Yokozuna, all of them. Bammer worked Bret, I think, at that point. Bam Bam had some good matches, but Bret was just killing it with everybody. Owen, Jesus Christ, the matches he had with Owen. And then Shawn it was a little bit behind. He was still the Intercontinental guy for a little bit after Bret was in the world title picture. But Vince didn't want Bret in the world title picture. And he started getting this hard-on for Shawn again after he had his hard-on for Diesel, because he had a hard-on for Diesel first, who was brought in by Shawn, so that had to be a kick in the balls. But Shawn worked his way up, and at WrestleMania 12, the boyhood dream has come true. And his run was not anything to write home about. Neither was Bret's, as far as like a money drawing star power boom period or anything like that. But Bret was out there having kick-ass quality matches. Shawn had some pretty damn good matches. He had one of Mick Foley's best matches at the time. He was having good matches with Nash and that kind of shit, but Bret was just a little bit better than Shawn, right? And because the two cannot coexist at the same time, they were inevitably forced back together. Their match at WrestleMania 12, they were supposed to rematch at WrestleMania 13, but Shawn just, whatever, had a little boo-boo or didn't want to or whatever the fuck the problem was at the time. And then you get into the Attitude Era, where you got DX and you got the reformation of the Hart Foundation, and they're just Canada all the way, and just more great rivalries, right? The mic work, the sunny days, the lost your smile, all that shit. These are two parallel careers, and sadly they split ways at the Survivor Series and had that awesome match up until the screw job, and then obviously the screw job's been covered to death. Bret leaves the company, and that was it until Bret finally came back and they had that handshake on Monday Night Raw, and they hugged it out. Bret still talks shit about Shawn, so I don't think he fully made up with Shawn or anything like that. But these guys, the parallel careers that these two had, the rivalry that they've had throughout that parallel career, from tag teams to Intercontinental, it is most likely the greatest rivalry in professional wrestling for that reason, because it was in all phases of their career, in all divisions, at all levels. You could argue like a Stone Cold versus The Rock was the greatest feud because they had a couple WrestleMania matches or whatever. You might not be wrong. You could argue any other number of feuds, but this one will go down as one of the most legendary feuds in the history of professional wrestling. And if I had to pick, if you just gun to my head, are you a Bret guy or are you a Shawn guy? When I was a kid, I grew up a Shawn guy. I liked Bret too. I liked them both as a kid. I liked Shawn's character and some of the flashier stuff he was doing. I can't say I was huge on the high flying stuff, but I'm sure it had an effect on me appreciating Shawn. But as soon as he turned on Marty, I was a fan of Shawn. When he was the sexy boy with Sherry, I was a fan of him. I always liked the bad guys as a kid. Even when Mach was a bad guy, bad guys were always cool to me. I don't know. I guess that tells you all you need to know about me. But I was always a fan of Bret Hart's work. When in my brain, when I think to pro wrestling perfection, like in-ring crispness, it's Bret, the fucking Hitman Hart, the excellence of execution, truly. So, gun to my head, I'm a Bret Hart guy. I would rather sit and watch Bret Hart matches all day long than Shawn Michaels matches. And that's saying something, because Shawn Michaels is widely considered as the greatest of all time. So, that's just my 2 cents. You're Jim Cornette's on his podcast. We're going to wrap this up for now. And who knows what the next chapter in the greatest rivalry of professional wrestling might be. Let me tell you something, brother. You can check out full episodes each and every Sunday right here on this channel, dude. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget to take your vitamins and say your prayers, brother.